September 2015. A heavy atmosphere enveloped the suburbs of Syracuse, New York, nearly 700 miles from Evanston, Illinois. The cold light from flashlights reflected through the silent window frames of the house at the end of Oak Hollow Drive, where a team of investigators from the Chicago Police Department was combing through every room. Center, I need confirmation. The DNA sample matches the victim Laura Myers completely. The voice of investigator Colin Fitzpatrick echoed softly over the radio, mingling with the patter of light rain in the backyard. On the table, a women's wristwatch with a worn brown leather strap lay in a sealed bag, faintly engraved with LM fetid. It was the last remnant of the woman who had vanished from Evanston on a foggy September morning in 1982. What began as a routine DNA file review in the Cold Case DNA Legacy Project had now become an unexpected turning point. A disappearance thought to have faded into oblivion, with no body, no suspect, suddenly came alive with a chain of new evidence: blood in the shirt cuff, a diagonal spatter on the wall, and a skull dredged from the North Branch River, all pointing to a name familiar to the town of Evanston: Dr. Thomas Myers, the man who for many years had been seen as a symbol of trust and propriety. For over 3 decades, Laura's disappearance was an unsolved mystery, a wife who went out for a jog and never returned. Each autumn that passed, Lake Michigan fogged over again, and her family still waited until Fitzpatrick reopened the dusty file box in the Cook County archives, and from just a small blood stain on the bedsheet, the entire veil of truth began to tear apart. The 2015 discovery was not just a solution to the disappearance. It was the first domino that toppled the wall of lies that had stood for over 30 years, where bloodstains were overlooked, testimonies ignored, and the perpetrator blended into the community like an innocent. Because when the police finally identified the suspect and made the arrest, it wasn't a stranger, but the man who had brought life to thousands, living among them, respected by them, and hiding a horrific secret for 33 years. The Laura Myers case was not just a closed file. It was a testament to the power of science, to the perseverance of investigators who refused silence, and to the voice of forgotten victims. When the truth finally came to light, Evanston not only lost an icon, but was forced to confront the most terrifying question: what do we really know about the people living next to us? This is a story of loss, perseverance, deception, and ultimately justice delayed, but not denied. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. Evanston, Illinois, a fall morning in 1982. The air was damp and chilly, carrying the scent of decaying leaves and moisture from Lake Michigan in the distance. The quiet street lay under a thin layer of fog, with only the distant echo of a school bus and a few leaves crunching on the wet sidewalk. In the 2-story red brick house on Forest Avenue, Laura Myers, 33 years old, a high school teacher, was preparing for her usual jog. She had put on her workout clothes, tied her hair up high, laced up her familiar white sneakers, and poured a cup of hot coffee onto the table. Outside the window, the sky was overcast, the lake nearly blending into the fog. Laura opened the back door to breathe in the cool morning air, the mist wafting in and lightly dampening her hair. Mrs. Harper, the neighbor, was watering her plants and looked up to see Laura standing in the backyard. "It's really foggy this morning," she said. Laura smiled, pulled up her windbreaker collar, waved goodbye, and stepped out the back gate, her petite figure gradually fading into the gray mist. That was the last time anyone saw her. Inside the house, the small radio in the kitchen continued broadcasting the weather report: temperature around 58 degrees F, light winds from the east. Laura's coffee cup cooled gradually, its steam dissipating. Nearly 2 hours later, Thomas Myers, an obstetrician gynecologist and Laura's husband, woke up. He softly called his wife's name, but the bedroom held only silence. The blanket on her side was pulled askew, the pillow still bearing an indentation. Thomas went down to the kitchen, saw the coffee cup placed there, untouched, and her jogging jacket, still neatly hung on the hook. He looked around, then went out to the back porch. The fog was still thick, no one visible on the street. A flicker of worry turned into unease. Thomas picked up the phone, called a few friends, then the nearby neighbors. No one had seen Laura that morning except Mrs. Harper, and she only said she looked completely normal. By around 9:30, he returned to the bedroom, stood silently for a moment by the bed, then glanced at the wall calendar. Still marked for an afternoon run, not morning. Everything in the house was intact, but that very intactness sent a chill down his spine. Thomas went back to the living room, placed his hand on the beige rotary phone, hesitated for a few seconds, then dialed the emergency number. When the dispatcher's voice came on the line, he spoke slowly, his voice hoarse, laced with fear and confusion. "My wife's missing." The last sound in the house was the dry ticking of the wall clock as Thomas set the receiver down. A few minutes later, the wail of police sirens pierced the thick silence of the foggy morning outside. 2 officers from the Evanston Police Department stepped into the front yard, carrying the chill and the smell of gasoline, their jackets soaked with dew. Thomas greeted them at the porch, his face dazed, his eyes still fixed on the empty street. "My wife went out for her jog, like always. But today, she didn't come back," he said, his voice trembling slightly. The wooden door swung open, and the small house quickly became the first scene of the disappearance. The air inside was eerily quiet. The police moved slowly through the hallway, their footsteps echoing softly on the polished wooden floor. In the kitchen, Laura's coffee cup still sat on the table, its steam long gone, the small radio still playing the morning program. One officer gently pushed open the back door, the hinges creaking with a long squeak. Outside was a damp yard, dew streaks on the concrete patio, no clear footprints leading away. On the second floor, the master bedroom cast a dim light through half-drawn curtains. The bed was unmade, blankets and pillows rumpled, the cream-colored sheet bearing a small red spot near the pillow edge, so tiny it could easily be overlooked, if not examined closely. Next to the bed, a damp towel was draped over the chair arm, mottled with a few dark stains. "Was she injured?" one officer asked, and Thomas shook his head immediately. "No, last night Laura had a nosebleed. I helped her wipe it and left the towel there." He spoke in an even, calm tone, but his eyes avoided their gaze. They continued around the house. In the bathroom, the mirror and sink were spotless, no signs of water splashes or fresh blood stains. In the living room, the sofa was neat, a medical journal open to the middle page. Everything looked too tidy, too perfect, as if Laura's life had merely paused for a few hours, rather than vanished. One of the 2 officers stepped out to the back porch, looking toward the park not far away, where fog still blanketed the ground. "Which way does she usually run?" he asked. Thomas pointed east, out the back, across the small road, then around the lake. "She goes almost every morning." The officer nodded, turned back, and exchanged quick words with his partner. No one said anything more about the bed or the small red spot on the towel, but their eyes glanced at it again before leaving. Another car arrived, carrying 2 members of the search team. They entered the house to get the victim's description, age, height, hair color, clothing, white, sneakers. Thomas answered each question slowly and clearly, sometimes pausing, as if trying to recall small details. "She was wearing a blue windbreaker." "I think so." "Or gray." Outside, the radio from the patrol car echoed, "Urgent bulletin, missing woman in Evanston area, name Laura Myers, 33 years old." Before leaving, one officer turned back to ask, "Doctor, was there anything unusual last night? Anyone drop by, for instance?" Thomas shook his head, slightly furrowing his brow. "No, just the 2 of us at home. Dinner, watched the news, then bed. All very normal." As they left, Thomas stood silently in the doorway, watching the red and blue lights fade around the corner. The house fell silent again. In the upstairs bedroom, the bedsheet still bore the small red mark, like a paint dot, weak sunlight filtering through the curtains, making it gleam faintly. In the kitchen, Laura's cold coffee cup remained on the wooden table, a faint ring of water like a reminder that she had been there, just hours before vanishing without a trace. That afternoon, the area around Gilson Park was partially cordoned off. Evanston police set up temporary barriers, patrol cars lining Sheridan Road. The smell of sea salt mingled with cold gusts from Lake Michigan. The sky was gray and overcast, the fog so thick that the distant water nearly disappeared. Under the grass, the search team's footprints mingled with fresh mud streaks. Rescue personnel coordinated with volunteers, dividing into groups. They carried handheld radios, flashlights, and maps of Laura's usual jogging route. She usually took this path, one officer said, pointing to the narrow trail running along the lakeside trees. Police dogs were unleashed, noses close to the ground, barking shortly when they caught a whiff of perfume mixed with salt. But just a few hundred meters in, they stopped, circled, and went silent. The scent trail ending in the middle of the path. On the lake, 3 rubber boats moved slowly, rows of people leaning down with lights, scanning for unusual floating objects. Occasionally they paused to retrieve a branch, a trash bag, a torn raincoat, then continued. The wind grew stronger, waves lapping the shore in bursts. A rescue worker lowered his voice. If she fell in this morning, the waves could have carried her far by now. In the area near the Wilmette breakwater, as the sun began to set, the dim light reflected on the water, a volunteer named Raymond bent down and froze. Amid the water weeds and drifting debris, something white bobbed. He waded in, gloved hands pulling it closer. A sneaker, Nike brand, small size, laces still tied. He placed it in a nylon bag, staring silently at the lake. No one spoke for a moment. The shoe was brought to Thomas for identification. He looked at it, fingers trembling slightly. Yes, it's hers. I bought those for Laura last year. His voice dropped, then he turned away, avoiding the police's gaze. That evening, flashlight beams swept across the park grass. The search team continued combing the narrow path from the Myers house to the lake. A few volunteers picked up scraps of paper, a water bottle cap, but nothing of value. The smell of gasoline from rescue boats mixed with cold mist, creating a heavy atmosphere blanketing the area. The next day, the search expanded northward. A group of Howard Street bridge repair workers said they had seen a woman in a blue windbreaker, hair tied high, running alone on the east sidewalk the previous morning. No one remembered the exact time, just estimating around 6-something. When police showed them Laura's photo, one recognized her, could be her, but I'm not sure. The fog was thick. The police dogs were brought back, this time tracking the scent from the shoe. They ran along the lakeside road, stopping at a low-lying area near a stone fence. One dog barked loudly, but upon close inspection, it was just an abandoned squirrel nest. Under the damp ground, no drag marks, no signs of heavy objects moved. The police exchanged glances, flashlights sweeping over the dew-soaked trees, then clicking off. On the third morning after Laura's disappearance, rescue boats still scanned the lake. Each time an object surfaced, everyone fell silent, waited, then exhaled when it turned out to be just a log. In the park parking lot, weary volunteers sat on toolboxes, the smell of weak brewed coffee drifting in the wind. No one spoke loudly. It seemed everyone feared breaking the silence that was growing eerily ominous. As night fell, flashlights were gathered, fog rolling back over the lake, blanketing every stone step of the breakwater. A young officer gazed out at the vast darkness, whispering, "No traces, no body." She vanished like she was never here. No one replied, but the words made the air even heavier. As they packed up equipment, the radio crackled from the command vehicle. Search, suspended, resume in the morning. The white shoe lay in a sealed bag on the back seat of the police car. Moisture from the leather still beating. Outside, the lake waves lapped rhythmically, cold and indifferent, as if no one had ever left the shore that morning. 2 days after the Lake Michigan shoreline search was temporarily halted, samples collected from the Myers house were sent to the Evanston Police Department's lab. In the small corrugated metal room, the smell of formalin solution and alcohol lingered. A middle-aged technician in rubber gloves carefully dripped reagent onto the cut swatch of bedsheet. The liquid turned dark in seconds. He quickly noted the result on the test form, blood type O, matching Laura Myers' medical records provided by Evanston Hospital earlier. No one was surprised. Most missing persons left some trace of themselves at home, and the stain was so small it was hard to consider evidence. But when the crime scene photos were developed, what made the investigators pause wasn't the blood type, but its location. In one photo, the dark streak appeared clearly on the wall, streaking diagonally from under the bed upward, forming a thin arc toward the window frame. Lieutenant Mills, who had been at the scene on the first day, leaned close to the photo, pensive. "If she just had a nosebleed like her husband said," he muttered. "Why is there blood at nearly 40 inches high and spattered like that?" A colleague shrugged. "Maybe the towel wipe splattered, or someone accidentally flung it." They folded the photo and filed it in the envelope. In 1982, it wasn't enough to warrant charges or an expanded investigation. Thomas Myers arrived at the police station that afternoon. He wore a gray suit, carrying a folder of his wife's medical records. "She used to get dizzy when standing up too quickly," he explained. "I'm afraid Laura might have fainted, fallen into the lake, or gone somewhere disoriented." His voice was low, unavoidably trembling slightly. The police asked a few brief questions, then let him go. With no concrete evidence, they couldn't hold him longer. On the desk, the Myers-Laura missing person file thickened with a few more sheets. Lab reports, scene photos, witness statements, and a short narrative. Sergeant Foster glanced through, tapping his pen slowly. "No DNA, no foreign traces, no direct witnesses. We got nothing." Mills nodded, his gaze still fixed on the blood spatter photo. "If it was just an outdoor accident," he said quietly, "there should be at least some sign outside. But here, everything stops inside the house." But then he closed the file. There was no direction to pursue. That evening, the office lights dimmed one by one. On the shelf, the small evidence box containing the bedsheet swatch and damp towel was sealed, marked with red ink code. No one knew those two items would lie dormant in storage for over 3 decades. Outside, wind from the lake swept through the quiet rows of houses in Evanston. On the street leading to Gilson Park, the poster with Laura Myers' photo was still fresh, the laminated paper fluttering lightly in the breeze. The simple text below, "Missing since September 19, 1982. Please call if you have any information." But the phone at the police station never rang. The investigation stalled right where it began. A woman leaving the house in the morning vanishing into silence. No evidence of crime, no signs of death, just assumptions. Maybe she fell into the water, maybe she left for personal reasons, or maybe something else happened that no one wanted to consider. Finally, Mills closed the file, placed it on the shelf, and sighed. "We'll keep it open," he said to Foster, "but there's no direction anymore." His colleague nodded, turned off the light, leaving the room in the dim glow of the hallway. Outside, fog fell again, and the streetlights reflected on the distant lake, where the dark waters still lapped steadily, as cold as the day Laura first vanished. After nearly a week with no further traces from the white shoe that washed up near the breakwater, Laura Myers' disappearance shrouded the entire town of Evanston in unanswered questions. The local paper ran a small headline, "Evanston Teacher's Mysterious Disappearance, Police Continue Search." But behind the outward calm, the investigative team had begun pursuing 3 entirely different leads, and one by one, each led to a dead end. The first lead was accidental drowning. A reasonable theory for someone who jogged regularly along Lake Michigan's shore. On the 8th morning, divers were called in from the Chicago Fire Department's rescue unit to assist. They dove into the waters near Gilson Park, the area where the shoe was found. The vast lake was cold enough to turn breath to vapor instantly. The divers moved through the murky water, each carrying an iron hook to rake the bottom, but found nothing but algae and broken rocks. After 3 days, they ended the search without discovering any related objects. One officer whispered as he climbed ashore, wetsuit dripping. If she fell in, she'd have surfaced by now. The waves here don't hold anyone down that long. With the accident possibility ruled out, the team shifted to the second lead: abduction. Evanston wasn't a big city, but crowded enough for every neighborhood to have passers-by. Officers combed the list of taxis operating on the morning of September 19th, questioning each driver about female passengers matching Laura's description. No one remembered clearly. One driver said he picked up a brunette near the park, but she was with a young man, not matching the description. Police also knocked on every door around the Forest Avenue neighborhood, asking if anyone heard strange noises or saw a suspicious vehicle. The answers were all the same: no screams, no slamming doors, no figures leaving that house, except Laura in the morning. The third investigative lead, voluntary departure, opened when a young detective found a notebook of lesson plans and a few unpaid bills in Laura's desk. He suspected she might be stressed and wanted to get away for a while. But when checking her bank account, Laura's savings were intact. No withdrawals, no plane tickets booked, no signs of contact with anyone elsewhere. Personal mail arriving at the house was mostly utility bills and old student letters, no note foreshadowing a departure. On the 11th day, police invited Thomas Myers to the station for a more detailed statement. He arrived on time, in a white shirt and black tie, composed demeanor. When asked again about the evening before the disappearance, he recounted, "We had dinner together, talked about Katie's school. She went to bed before me. That night, I heard her tossing a few times, but nothing unusual." Thomas described waking up late the next morning, finding the bed empty, and assuming his wife had gone jogging as usual. He also provided his own schedule for that morning, detailed down to the hour, but no witnesses corroborated it. While taking the statement, one detective observed quietly, he had seen many husbands lose wives in similar circumstances. Most fidgety, red-eyed, voices breaking. Thomas was different. His voice was steady and low, eyes dry, hands clasped tightly on the table. At the end of the interrogation, he even politely shook each officer's hand, saying softly, "I understand you're doing your job. Thank you." After he left, that detective just noted in the margin of the report, "Emotional response inconsistent with a man whose wife is missing." The following days brought no progress. All leads had circled back. The lake held no body, the streets no witnesses, the bank no withdrawals. Laura Myers seemed to have dissolved completely, leaving only a white shoe and faint bloodstains in the silent bedroom. As October arrived, the weather grew colder, thick fog blanketing Lake Michigan each morning. In the Evanston police office, the search area map remained pinned with crisscrossing red tacks, points they had covered, revisited, and then erased. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew the case was slipping into the shadows where there were no more paths forward. Winter 1982 arrived early and harsh. Snow-blanketed Forest Avenue, where the Myers family home stood silent, the second-floor windows still tightly shut, as on the morning Laura vanished. After more than 3 months of searching, Evanston police meetings grew shorter, daily reports thinner with new details. All investigative leads had been combed through repeatedly. Lake Michigan yielded no body. No one saw Laura, and not a single sign indicated she left town intentionally. Early December, the case was officially transferred to the Cook County Cold Case Division. On a gloomy afternoon, Lieutenant Mills and Sergeant Foster personally packed the final pieces of evidence into the sealed box. The towel with the red stain, the swatch of bedsheet cut from the bloodied spot, and several black and white photos of the bedroom. All were numbered, wrapped in nylon bags, and carefully placed into a cardboard box labeled Laura Myers, Evanston 1982. When Foster applied the final seal, he paused for a moment. "Do you think she might still be alive somewhere?" he asked. Mills didn't answer, only saying softly, "Either way, she's gone from here." The file box was transferred to the Cook County Evidence Unit storage vault, an old basement beneath the main Chicago Police Building. There, hundreds of unsolved cases were lined up in long rows, numbered by year, each box just a fragment of forgotten memory. When the warehouse keeper signed for it, Laura Myers' disappearance officially entered silence, no more than an entry in the logbook. The following year, Thomas Myers still lived in the old house, but he was rarely seen outside. Neighbors said he sold the house in the spring of 1984, moved to Indiana, and later to Syracuse, New York. He retired early, opened a small clinic, and after a few years remarried a nurse who had worked with him. When asked, he only said briefly, "Laura went in an accident, and I've learned to accept it." No one mentioned the disappearance anymore. Katie, their only daughter, grew up with that void. She moved in with her aunt in Springfield, went to college, and became a teacher like her mother. On her bedroom wall still hung a photo of the three of them from their last summer vacation by Lake Michigan. Laura smiling radiantly, holding a blue beach towel, the wind tousling her brown hair. Whenever someone asked about her mother, Katie only replied lightly, "She went missing when I was little," then changed the subject. In Evanston, the house at 411 Forest Avenue changed owners a few times. Cleaners once whispered to each other that in the old bedroom, under the new paint, sometimes the light reflected strangely on the wall near the window, where 30 years earlier, a thin bloodstain had appeared in the crime scene photo. But no one paid attention, and time continued to dust over everything. As 1982 drew to a close, the police closed the file with a red stamp. No further leads. It was one of hundreds of unsolved cases in northern Illinois. Months later, those who had participated in the search for Laura were reassigned to new cases, gradually forgetting her name. In the Cook County storage vault, that small file box sat in Bay 3, Row G, among hundreds of others, covered in the same gray dust. On the label, Lieutenant Mills' handwriting had faded, Laura Myers, Evanston, 1982. For more than 3 decades afterward, no one opened it again. Only when technology changed, and a different pair of eyes looked back at what they had once overlooked, was that name mentioned for the first time. But that was a story for many years later. 33 years passed. In 2015, the Cook County Evidence Unit's basement storage had changed. Fluorescent lights blazed brightly, new metal shelves had replaced the old ones, and thousands of old file boxes were being reorganized in a special Chicago Police Department project called the Cold Case DNA Legacy. The project was launched with a simple but ambitious goal to review backlog cases from the pre-DNA era, using modern technology to find answers for names that had been forgotten. In the list of over 300 cases, Laura Myers, Evanston, 1982, was line 147. That dusty old case caught the eye of investigator Colin Fitzpatrick, newly assigned to the unit. He read the brief description: disappearance, no body, evidence towel, bedsheet swatch, men's shirt. An unsolved missing person case with evidence still intact in cold storage. That was exactly what Fitzpatrick was always looking for. He went down to check it himself. Under the white lights, the small cardboard box with the code 82 EVN 147 was pulled from the shelf. The dust was so thick that when he opened the lid, Fitzpatrick had to sneeze. Inside, 3 carefully sealed nylon bags, the paper tags yellowed but still bearing the signature of Lieutenant Robert Mills. A grayish-white towel, stiffened by years, and a light blue men's shirt, the item the file noted as submitted by Thomas Myers in the initial interview. "Hard to believe they kept it this clean," Fitzpatrick muttered, placing each bag on the metal table. Under the light, the dark stains near the shirt cuff stood out like patches of lingering shadow. He submitted a request for full DNA testing to the Illinois State Forensic Lab. For the first time, Laura's evidence was examined with techniques that didn't exist in 1982. The sample was taken with extreme care. A technician cut a section from the shirt cuff fabric, placing it in a test tube with DNA extraction solution. Meanwhile, the towel was tested at both ends, where the old report noted faint red streaks. Preliminary results came back after 2 weeks. Fitzpatrick received the email in the late afternoon, while he was in the fourth-floor office at Chicago PD headquarters. The screen displayed the line, "2 DNA profiles detected, confirmed match to Laura Myers and Thomas Myers." He read the report over and over. 2 distinct DNA profiles, one from the victim, one from the husband. What caught his attention wasn't just that both profiles appeared together, but their location. In the attached microscopic image, Laura's blood cells were found on the inside of Thomas's shirt cuff, not the outside. According to forensic experience, that meant the shirt had direct contact with flowing blood. The wearer was very close to the blood source while it was still wet and unclotted. Fitzpatrick leaned back in his chair, staring out the sun-filled window, his hand gripping the printed results tightly. A disappearance considered an accident, a husband once described as cooperative, calm, and now the evidence said otherwise. "Inside the cuff," he muttered, as if rehearsing Time's warning, "things forgotten don't mean they're gone." That afternoon, Fitzpatrick replaced the evidence bags on the table, labeled them anew, and added a short line to the electronic file. Evidence reopened under Cold Case DNA Legacy Program. Indications of direct contact between victim's blood and spouse's clothing. Outside, the Chicago sun had tilted fully westward, casting a pale golden strip over the old row houses. In the cold room, Laura Myers' file box, dormant for over 30 years, had just been opened for the first time. And with it, the beginning of a second investigation where the past began to speak. A few weeks after the DNA results, Fitzpatrick sat in his office, amid stacks of old files and the musty smell of yellowed paper from the past. He couldn't stop thinking about the shirt, about the small drops of blood on the inside of the cuff, like a lie covered by time. But what troubled him more was the crime scene photo. In the old file, the only note on the blood on the wall was scribbled, "Minor stain near bed, possibly transfer." No one had ever verified it. No one had ever asked why it was in that position. Fitzpatrick requested access to all original materials, including the 35mm film negatives developed from the 1982 crime scene camera. The rolls were stored in old envelopes, edges frayed, the word Mills written in red marker, nearly faded. He took them to the Chicago Department's Modern Forensic Imaging Lab for digitization and enhancement. When the first images appeared on the screen, Fitzpatrick saw a world forgotten for over 30 years, pulled back to the present. Laura's bedroom, beige walls, window half open, dim light filtering in. The rumpled bed, and to the left, a thin dark streak, diagonal from low to high. He zoomed in, adjusted the contrast, then circled the area with the cursor. The blood didn't flow in a line like a nosebleed or typical scrape. It was a series of tiny pinpoint dots, fanned out, angled about 45 degrees. The hallmark of impact spatter, blood cast off when a strong force impacts the body. He sat silently for a long time. A chill ran down his spine. It couldn't be coincidence, couldn't just be an accidental wipe. Those blood drops were saying what the people in 1982 had overlooked. There had been a strong blow in this room. Fitzpatrick knew he needed an expert to confirm. He called Naperville, where Dr. Margaret Chumley, a retired forensic specialist, still consulted for the state police. She had once been head of Illinois' crime scene investigation unit, able to read bloodstains like a story. When he explained, she only said briefly, "Send me the original photos. I'll look." 3 days later, Fitzpatrick drove nearly 40 miles to meet her. In her office cluttered with documents and framed old case photos, Chumley put on her glasses, staring at the computer screen, displaying the enhanced image. She was silent for nearly 5 minutes, then pointed to the chain of small blood streaks. "See that? This isn't blood running down. This is blood cast off." Fitzpatrick nodded, his heart pounding. If it was a nosebleed, like the husband said, she smirked, shaking her head. Impossible. A nosebleed doesn't create a spatter pattern like that. This is impact force, a hard blow, direction from right to left, victim in a lower position than the force source. She zoomed in further on a section, pointing to the small droplets at the edge of the main streak. Look at these drops. Uniform size, even dispersal angle, meaning the blood was liquid, forced out by strong impact, not dried blood, not accidental cast-off. And the height? About 40 inches from the floor. That's the level of a blow when the victim is sitting or pressed down. Fitzpatrick exhaled, feeling like the final puzzle piece was falling into place. He asked, "If you had to write a conclusion, what would you call this?" Chumley removed her glasses, saying concisely, "This is blunt force trauma. Can't be a nosebleed. This is evidence of an assault." That statement flipped a switch in Fitzpatrick's mind. Everything, from the shirt with blood inside the cuff, to the spatter on the wall, pointed in the same direction. Laura Myers didn't go jogging and vanish. She was attacked, right in the room where she lived. Back in Chicago, Fitzpatrick reopened the electronic file. He entered one final note before saving: reclassification request, from missing person 1982 to homicide investigation 2015. The screen lit up with the confirmation status updated. Outside, the afternoon sun streamed through the office window, falling on the old file box on the desk. The box that had gathered dust for 30 years. For the first time since the day Laura vanished, her name was no longer in the missing persons category, but in the victims of a homicide. And that was just the beginning. A week after the file was officially reclassified, Fitzpatrick decided to return to where it all began. The house at 411 Forest Avenue in Evanston. 33 years later, the house belonged to a young family. The exterior freshly painted cream, the front yard full of golden chrysanthemums and young maples. None of them knew that the second-floor bedroom had once been the scene of an unsolved crime. That afternoon, Fitzpatrick knocked on the door with two forensic technicians. The homeowner, a woman named Erin Lambert, opened it with surprise. After hearing his explanation, a procedural re-inspection of the 1982 disappearance case, she nodded, slightly hesitant but agreeing. "If it helps find out what happened to her, go ahead," she said, unconsciously running a hand through her hair, as if to shake off the chill that had just crept in. The old bedroom had changed, gleaming new hardwood floors, brighter repainted walls, different bed and dresser. But the window frame position, the direction of light, and the space between the walls remained exactly as in the photos Fitzpatrick had studied hundreds of times. He stood in the middle of the room, looking around, then signaled the team to begin. The two spread a plastic tarp on the floor, turned on the luminol lights, and prepared the fluorescent reaction solution. The room darkened as they drew the curtains. One technician bent down, spraying thin layers of solution into the wood seams. Just seconds later, a pale blue glow quietly emerged from the floor, ethereal like small glowing star trails in the dark. "Reaction," the technician said softly. Fitzpatrick stepped closer, knelt down, and examined it closely. Long, narrow glowing streaks ran diagonally from the wall edge to the middle of the room, right at the position of the bloodstain in the 1982 crime scene photo. Despite the new paint and replaced flooring, the blood was still there, soaked deep into the old subfloor beneath. Without another word, they all understood. They were standing right where Laura Myers had been attacked. Fitzpatrick was silent for a long time. He felt the 3 decades compress into one moment as the blue luminol light flickered on the floor. "Photograph everything," he said quietly. The camera flashed repeatedly, the strobe lights mixing with the blue fluorescence, making the room look like a living negative. After finishing, they took a small sample from the strongest glowing area for DNA testing. The sample was placed in a sealed test tube, coated, and sent directly to the Illinois State Lab. A week later, the results came back. DNA matched perfectly with the sample of Laura Myers, preserved from the 1982 towel. Fitzpatrick read the results in his car, streetlights casting a dim yellow glow on the paper. The final line made him shudder. "Source confirmed. Human blood, consistent with direct bleeding event. Human blood, originating from direct bleeding. Not accidental spatter, not cleanup, but the trace of violence." He returned to the room once more the next day, just to stand silently in the middle, watching the sunlight slide across the new floor. Beneath it, deep through layers of wood, cells remained that spoke for what humans had nearly forgotten. He imagined Laura sitting on the bed edge that morning, perhaps with coffee still on the table, perhaps after an argument, perhaps just a small moment turning into fate. As he left, Fitzpatrick bowed his head in thanks to Erin Lambert. She asked, voice soft, "Did you find what you needed?" He paused at the threshold, replying, "We just found where it all ended." That evening, in the chilly Chicago Police Department office, Fitzpatrick placed the luminol photos next to the DNA report and added one final line to the electronic file. Evidence recovered from 411 Forest Avenue confirms attack occurred inside bedroom. Blood matched to Laura Myers. Scene consistent with assault, not voluntary disappearance. He sent the report to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office with a request to reopen the criminal investigation officially. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall. Snowflakes drifted lightly over Chicago, melting into the night. In the office, the screen light reflected on Fitzpatrick's face, his eyes bright, because for the first time in 33 years, the Laura Myers disappearance case was no longer an invisible mystery, but a real murder case. While awaiting a response from the state's attorney's office, Fitzpatrick continued tracing the small details left in the original file. If the scene had confirmed the attack location, then Thomas Myers' 1982 statement was the remaining piece to check. In an old plastic box at the end of the storage shelf, he found a faded cassette tape labeled Myers Interview, September 23, 1982. The tape was discolored, the plastic cloudy. But when placed in the player, the scratchy audio still played, the sound of chairs scraping, a light cough, then the voice of Lieutenant Robert Mills, the 1982 interrogator. "Mills, what time did you wake up?" "Thomas. Around 7:30. Laura wasn't in bed. I thought she went running." "Mills, did you touch the bed or clean anything?" "Thomas, no, I left it as is, just went downstairs to make coffee." Fitzpatrick paused, rewinding several times, listening carefully to every word. In Mills' handwritten notes that he had read earlier, there was a line, "Bed appeared used, sheets disturbed." The bedsheet rumpled, clearly touched. But what caught his attention more was the detail "didn't touch the bed," something Thomas repeated multiple times throughout the interrogation. The tape continued, Thomas's voice steady, slightly stiff. "Mills, and the towel in the bedroom, that red streak. What was it?" "Thomas, she had a nosebleed last night. I wiped it for her, must have gotten it on the towel." The familiar answer, the same explanation Thomas had repeated for over 3 decades. But as Fitzpatrick reopened the latest DNA results, he knew it was a lie. Laura's blood wasn't just on the towel, but deep in the bedroom floor and on Thomas's own cuff. He fast-forwarded to the end of the tape. Mills' voice softened, as if trying to wrap up. "Mills, did you wash the blankets or sheets after that?" "Thomas, no, I left them as is." The police had already looked. Fitzpatrick froze, his gaze fixed on that answer. He remembered the attached financial file had a dry cleaning receipt, a detail no one in 1982 had scrutinized. He reopened the paper file, flipping through the pages. Amid utility bills, a small yellowed receipt fell out. The faded ink was still readable. "Evergreen Dry Cleaners. Bedsheet stained. Pickup September 20th, 82. The pickup date was just 1 day after Laura vanished. Fitzpatrick sat silently, the receipt trembling slightly in his hand. The stained bedsheet was taken for cleaning just hours after Thomas claimed he didn't touch it. And that stain, he now knew for sure, wasn't coffee or ink, but blood. He rewound the tape once more, this time paying attention to the silences between answers. "After I left it as is." There was a long pause. Only the sound of slow breathing and Mills' pen scratching lightly on paper. Fitzpatrick had interrogated hundreds of suspects, and he knew this kind of silence well. It was when someone was thinking how to keep their lie consistent. He jotted a quick note. Timeline inconsistency, woke at 7:30 but called 911, near 9:40 2-hour gap. Bedsheet replaced, towel with blood, dry cleaning receipt, confirms post-incident cleanup activity. That evening, Fitzpatrick sat alone in the office, hallway lights casting long shadows on the floor. He played the tape again, hearing Thomas repeat, "Laura had a nosebleed." Each time, the words lost more weight, hollow as a thin shell. He remembered the blue luminol light in the Lambert house room, the blood streak still glowing clearly under the new wooden floor. Now the disparate pieces of evidence were fitting together, the diagonal blood spatter, DNA in the shirt, conflicting statements, and the dry cleaning receipt, all pointing to the same thing. Someone had tried to clean up the scene. Fitzpatrick removed his headphones, leaned back, and whispered into the darkness. He staged that room, not to hide an accident, but to erase the traces of a crime. The next morning, he wrote a short memo to Prosecutor Hanley. Review interview inconsistencies and newly found receipt. Evidence suggests deliberate cleanup post-incident. Scene staging confirmed. The Laura Myers, Evanston 1982, file thickened by a few pages, and for the first time, after more than 30 years, in the case cause notes section, Fitzpatrick added 3 words. Scene manipulated, homicide likely. As the pieces began to fit together, blood, statements, and the dry cleaning receipt, Fitzpatrick knew it was time to verify the most important thing, what really happened in Laura Myers' bedroom that morning. He brought all the data, crime scene images, luminol results, bloodstain positions, and old 1982 photos, to the Chicago Police Department's forensic lab. Here, the specialist team could recreate the scene using 3-dimensional simulation technology and real physical tests to check the impact hypothesis. Fitzpatrick presented to the technical team, "We have a 45-degree diagonal blood spatter, direction from right to left, height about 40 inches from the floor, victim sitting or pressed lower than the attacker. I want to test what kind of blow could produce a similar spatter pattern." On the lab table, a technician placed a model of the room, bed, walls, and window position, all matching the original. They used a head mannequin covered in soft silicone simulating skin and artificial blood, then positioned it at the bed's edge, exactly where Fitzpatrick indicated. At the opposite position, where the perpetrator could stand, they tested successively with weighted objects, a wooden stick, a crystal vase, and finally, a classic heavy metal desk lamp, weighing about 1.5 kilograms. The lamp was chosen not randomly. In a 1982 crime scene photo, Fitzpatrick had once noticed a small detail everyone back then overlooked. There was a desk lamp on the left side of the bed, but the right side, closest to the bloodstain, was empty. No lamp mark, no cord trace, as if someone had deliberately removed it after everything happened. "Begin," Fitzpatrick said. An assistant raised the lamp and struck the head model hard at a 45-degree angle, direction from right to left. Artificial blood sprayed out, splattering in a thin stream of small droplets diagonally onto the simulated wall panel. When the light shone on it, Fitzpatrick saw the tiny red spots aligned in a path, almost perfectly matching the real spatter pattern in Laura's 1982 photo. He stepped closer, carefully measured the distance, then compared it with software. Angle 43 degrees, height 39 inches, nearly exact, the technician reported. Droplet volume and direction consistent with impact spatter from a heavy object, not a fall impact. Fitzpatrick nodded. He requested a repeat with another object, a crystal vase of similar weight. This time, the blood pattern sprayed in a semicircle, thicker and lower. No match. With the wooden stick, the blood streaks were bolder and straighter, not forming the small droplet chain like in the photo. Only the blow with the metal desk lamp yielded a match in angle, force, and dispersal form. They took dozens of photos, high-speed video of every frame, recording the blood spread in the impact moment. Under the blue fluorescent light, the scene model became so eerie that Fitzpatrick had to turn away for a few seconds. When he turned back, on the white board, the blood droplets dried gradually, forming a thin curved fan shape, identical to the one on Laura's bedroom wall. That afternoon, he stayed alone in the lab, reviewing each slow-motion frame. In the video, as the lamp came down, Blood sprayed in an arc, and in the next second, the mannequin's body slumped to the right, the exact direction that, according to the crime scene photo, Laura had fallen. Fitzpatrick paused the frame, zoomed in on the spatter angle. The numbers appeared: 1.47 kilograms, angle 44 degrees, source height 40 inches, force direction right to left. He exhaled, jotting briefly in his notebook, right-handed blow, heavy object, force sufficient for severe head trauma. He recalled that in the personal file, Thomas Myers was described as right-handed. The seemingly meaningless detail now became a key piece. The missing murder weapon, the light position on the wall, the blood-spattered direction, all consistent with a right-handed person standing by the bed, striking in a natural reflex motion. The next day, Fitzpatrick presented the results to his superiors. On the projection screen, the test photos and original 1982 images were placed side by side. The final note on the report stood out. Likely murder weapon, heavy metal desk lamp, approximately 1.5 kilograms. Blood spatter angle and force direction match real scene pattern. Suspect right-handed. The meeting room fell silent. A veteran officer said softly, "So we know how he did it." Fitzpatrick nodded, closing the file, his voice low but firm. "Now we just need to prove when he did it." Outside, Chicago in late fall, sunlight slanting golden on the old rooftops. In the lab, the metal desk lamp was placed in a sealed glass case, a silent symbol of the truth, just pulled from the darkness of 33 years ago. July 2015, Chicago entered a sweltering summer. Along the North Branch River, a city work crew was conducting a dredging project on the long silted riverbed. The work proceeded slowly, the excavator's rumble mixing with the murky water, lapping the banks. No one expecting that morning would open the biggest turning point in a case forgotten for over 3 decades. Around 10 o'clock, as the fourth bucket was pulled up near the Lincoln Avenue Bridge area, the operator spotted a small round object glinting in the sunlight amid the mud and water. He signaled the workers to stop, climbed down to check. Amid the wet soil was a curved bone fragment the size of a palm, attached to a rusted metal hook, still clinging to a broken chain strand. When he wiped off the mud, 2 embossed initials appeared on the hook's face: ILM. The report was immediately sent to the Chicago Police Department. Fitzpatrick arrived at the scene just 2 hours later, when the area was already cordoned off. He bent down to look at the bone fragment in the nylon bag, his gaze lingering on the small hook. Without anyone saying it, he knew exactly what those 2 letters represented. "Laura Myers," he read softly, his voice dropping. The bone fragment was transferred to Northwestern University's forensic pathology lab for examination. Experts determined it was a portion of the occipital skull bone, with slight depressed fractures and surface erosion from prolonged submersion. The bone still bore a grooved fracture mark, consistent with trauma from impact by a hard object with a rounded edge, like a metal desk lamp. Fitzpatrick stood in the observation room as the forensic pathologist pointed to the X-ray screen, voice steady. "This fracture isn't from water or natural impact. It occurred while the victim was alive or immediately after death. Strong, focused force corresponding to a heavy object about 1.5 kilograms. If I had to guess, this blow caused immediate unconsciousness." Beside the X-ray was the clean necklace hook, the rust removed, revealing old engravings, LM, 1980. In the file, Fitzpatrick clearly remembered Laura often wore a silver necklace engraved with her initials, a gift from Thomas on their second wedding anniversary. Now, it lay on the stainless steel table, the final evidence linking past to present. DNA results came back a week later. The lab confirmed the bone sample matched perfectly with Laura Myers' DNA profile obtained from the 1982 towel. The report stated clearly, match probability 99.999%. Positive identification confirmed. Fitzpatrick read that line, then set the paper down on the table, his hand clenching tightly. 33 years, and finally, they had found her. Not in a grave, but in the cold riverbed, where the body had been left to drift away with time. When the investigative team returned to the scene, they mapped the area, marking the exact discovery location of the bone fragment. What made Fitzpatrick shudder was that these coordinates lay right on the route Thomas Myers had claimed in his statement as his morning walk for exercise. The path connecting from Evanston to the Lincoln Bridge, less than 7 miles from his house. The travel data from the old police report matched perfectly. A young officer said softly, if he wanted to dispose of it, this river stretch was the perfect choice. No cameras back then, deep water, strong current. Fitzpatrick was silent, just staring at the swirling water under the bridge, murky and indifferent. He imagined that night, a man driving slowly along the empty road, stopping, opening the trunk, then tossing away what he thought would never be found. With the new evidence, the case was upgraded to the highest level, homicide with recovered remains. The entire file, from DNA results, forensic examination, to crime scene photos, was compiled into a report sent to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. Fitzpatrick wrote the final line in the summary section, remains consistent with victim Laura Myers, cause of death. Blunt force trauma, body disposed in North Branch River, location matches suspect's known travel route, 1982. As he signed his name, the afternoon sunlight streamed through the glass onto the photo of Laura on the table, a photo of her with a radiant smile, hair tied high, eyes bright, as if she'd never known fear. Below, her handwritten note from that year's teacher journal surfaced in his memory. Tomorrow is always a new chance. Fitzpatrick gazed at the photo for a long time, then said softly, tomorrow has come, Laura. Outside, the North Branch River still flowed quietly through the city, carrying layers of time's dust. But this time, it had returned what it had hidden for over 30 years, the truth. When the examination report was sent back, Fitzpatrick spent nearly the entire night in his office. On the table, photos were spread everywhere, old blood under the floor, glowing luminol images, impact model with the metal desk lamp, X-ray of the skull fragment, and the DNA results matching Laura Myers perfectly. He sat silently looking at it all, then began arranging each piece of evidence in order: motive, actions, and consequences. 33 years of silence now had a clear voice. Fitzpatrick compiled an 80-page comprehensive report. The first page read, Reopened investigation. Laura Myers homicide, Evanston, Illinois, 1982. Below that line was the evidence catalog, victim's DNA in Thomas Myers' shirt cuff. Blood on bedroom wall, matching 45 degrees spatter angle. Skull bone discovered at North Branch River with hard object impact marks, matching victim's DNA. Conflicting statements, dry cleaning receipt proving scene cleanup, test model recreating blow, consistent with right-handed person. Each piece of evidence alone might suggest suspicion, but placed side by side, they formed a complete picture, a murder concealed by the calm demeanor of a doctor. The next morning, Fitzpatrick went to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office to present the file to prosecutor William Hanley, who had handled many complex murder cases. Hanley read in silence for nearly an hour, then looked up. Are you sure? Fitzpatrick nodded without hesitation. We have DNA, the scene and the body. It's no longer a disappearance. He struck her, cleaned the blood, and dumped the body in the river. 33 years can't erase the truth. Hanley nodded slightly, flipping to the last page, where Fitzpatrick had attached the photo of the silver necklace engraved with LM. We'll need federal coordination, he said, voice firm. The suspect resides in New York. I'll sign the indictment request and submit it to Cook County Court tomorrow morning. 2 days later, the file was officially presented to the court. The chief judge approved the arrest warrant for Dr. Thomas Myers on September 12, 2015. The bold red text on the paper, warrant issued. First-degree murder. Laura Myers, 1982. Fitzpatrick held the warrant in his hand, feeling like a wind from Lake Michigan back then was blowing through again, cold and heavy. He knew the next step wouldn't be easy. The suspect was once reputable, had private lawyers, and had lived peacefully for over 30 years. A small mistake, A leak could make him flee before police could approach. Hanley called a closed meeting that very night, with representatives from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and the Syracuse, New York Police Department, where Thomas lived. The plan was marked confidential, eyes only. They determined Thomas was in a northern Syracuse suburb neighborhood, a single-story house at the end of a cul-de-sac, with a small backyard. He lived with his second wife, retired, with little neighbor interaction. Fitzpatrick emphasized no press notification, no details leaked. The arrest must be executed quietly, before dawn. He requested the federal team coordinate with local police to avoid gaps. All case-related information was encrypted and stored on internal servers, accessible only to a small group. The night before departure, Fitzpatrick printed a portrait photo of Laura, folded it neatly, and put it in his jacket pocket. He didn't believe in omens, but wanted to carry her image as a reminder of why he had reopened this case. Early morning on September 14th, the small convoy rolled out from Chicago PD headquarters, blue lights reflecting through the windows. Fitzpatrick sat in the back seat, still holding the thick file. In his mind, the details looped: 45-degree blood, the missing desk lamp, the two letters LM on the necklace. Everything that had lain dormant in the dark was about to have its chance to speak before justice. As the car crossed the Indiana state line, Hanley called with a brief update. "The warrant is active. We execute upon arrival." Fitzpatrick replied softly, "Roger that." Outside the window, dawn was rising, the first light of the new day piercing the thin fog, just like the first time Laura left home, on that fateful morning in 1982. Only this time, that light was no longer for disappearance, but for the day justice began to be named. Early morning on September 15, 2015, Syracuse was still foggy. The small street, in the northern suburbs of the city, lay in the quiet light of dawn. At the end of Oak Hollow Drive, a single-story house with pale yellow walls stood as silent as any other morning. Only difference was, today it was surrounded in silence. Two unmarked federal police vehicles parked about 50 meters from the house. Fitzpatrick sat in the first car, eyes watching through the fogged window glass. His watch read 5:42 a.m. In his ear, the commander's voice came over the radio. "Team 1, ready to breach," he replied softly. "Copy that. Go." The first knock sounded short and firm. No response. After 30 seconds, the SWAT team breached the lock, rushing in. Heavy footsteps echoed on the wooden floor, mixed with shouts of FBI, police, filling the house. Fitzpatrick followed right behind, heart beating slow but heavy, in the living room. Thomas Myers stood by the window, wearing a robe, silver hair neatly cut, face calm to an eerie degree. He wasn't panicked, didn't resist, just looked up at the team leader. "What's this about?" His voice hoarse and dry. Fitzpatrick stepped forward, holding out the red-stamped arrest warrant. "Dr. Thomas Myers, you are under arrest for first-degree murder. Victim Laura Myers, occurred September 19, 1982, Evanston, Illinois." Thomas looked at the paper, then straight at Fitzpatrick, eyes unwavering. He smirked, speaking slowly, almost whispering, "You'll never find her." The words made the room chill for a beat, as if time rewound 33 years. Fitzpatrick replied, voice low and firm, "We already have, Doctor." Two officers cuffed Thomas, reading his Miranda rights. He didn't resist, just asked to put on a sweater. As he was led through the hallway, his gaze stopped on the wall photo, an old, faded wedding photo of him and Laura on Michigan Beach. The smile in the photo seemed from another world. The search team quickly spread through the rooms. In a desk drawer, they found an envelope with many black and white photos, including ones of Laura taken at the school where she taught, and a few dated close to the disappearance. In the study, under a wooden shelf, they discovered Evanston hospital files where Thomas had worked. One document dated matching Laura's disappearance time, a leave request for family reasons. In a small cabinet by the bed, an officer opened an old jewelry box, finding a women's wristwatch, face scratched, leather strap worn. Fitzpatrick recognized it immediately, the watch identical to the one Laura wore in a 1981 photo, just a year before she vanished. As Fitzpatrick passed the door, he turned back to look at Thomas sitting on the chair, wrists cuffed, head slightly bowed. "You kept more than I thought," he said. Thomas didn't reply, just smiled faintly, a thin and aged smile like the dust covering everything they had just found. The convoy left Syracuse at 7 a.m., transporting Thomas Myers back to Chicago for extradition per the Cook County court order. The sky to the east was lightening, sunlight slanting through the car windows, reflecting on Fitzpatrick's face, where exhaustion and relief mingled. He looked at the folded warrant in his hand, on which the red executed stamp had just been placed over the September 12, 2015 signing date. By noon, the news spread: 1982 Evanston disappearance solved, after 33 years. Major newspapers simultaneously reported on the arrest of the renowned obstetrician, who had vanished from the investigative files in the 1980s. That evening's TV news opened with a cold report. 3 decades after the mysterious disappearance of teacher Laura Myers, her husband, Dr. Thomas Myers, has been arrested in Syracuse, New York. Police confirm that DNA, the crime scene, and artifacts found all lead to one conclusion. This was not a disappearance, but a murder. In the Chicago PD office, Fitzpatrick watched the broadcast on the small screen. He didn't smile, just nodded slightly. On his desk, the photo of Laura in the silver frame remained in its usual spot, next to the now cold coffee cup. Afternoon light streamed through the window, illuminating the photo, making her eyes in the image seem brighter, as if finally, after years submerged in darkness, Laura had been seen again. The Cook County Police Department's interrogation room on the morning of September 17, 2015, was unusually quiet. On the table, the black recorder was ready, with 2 spare tapes beside it. White light from the ceiling cast down, reflecting off the cold metal surface. Across the table, Thomas Myers, 77 years old, sat upright, hands placed in front, still maintaining the calm demeanor of someone accustomed to giving orders in the clinic. Fitzpatrick sat opposite, with prosecutor William Hanley beside him. The interrogation began at 9 a.m. with seemingly familiar questions. "Do you know why we brought you back here, Doctor?" Hanley opened. Thomas looked straight ahead, voice hoarse but steady. "You think I killed my wife, but I didn't do it." Fitzpatrick turned on the recorder, voice even and deliberate. "Dr. Myers, we'll talk for as long as necessary. You have the right to remain silent, but everything you say today will be recorded." He nodded. At first, Thomas recounted the old story down to every detail. Laura went jogging, didn't return. He called the police, cooperated in the search. Every sentence, every word matched the 1982 statement. But Fitzpatrick wasn't listening anymore. He waited until Thomas mentioned the previous evening, when they watched TV and Laura seemed tired. Fitzpatrick interrupted, "Tired or angry?" Thomas looked at him, eyes flickering briefly. "We just argued a little about money. Nothing serious." "Did she ever leave the room?" "No, she went to bed before me." Fitzpatrick nodded slightly, then slid a photo across the table. The 1982 crime scene photo, the 45-degree diagonal blood streak on the wall. "Doctor, do you know what this is?" Thomas glanced at it. "Her blood. She had a nosebleed." Fitzpatrick said nothing, pulling out a second photo, the 2015 luminol glow under the floor. "And this? Her blood, but embedded deep under the new wooden floor. Can you explain why?" He fell silent. Fitzpatrick continued, "Laura's DNA on your cuff. Blood spatter on the wall at an angle matching a blow. And now, we have her bones found in the North Branch River, where you used to drive to work every day." The air in the room thickened. Thomas leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the photo. After a long moment, he said softly, "I didn't mean to." Fitzpatrick paused his pen. "What did you say?" Thomas took a deep breath, voice low and muffled. "I didn't mean to kill her. That night we argued. She said she wanted to leave me, wanted a divorce. I lost control. I grabbed her arm. She fell. Her head hit the bed frame. The words exploded in the otherwise silent room. Fitzpatrick looked at Hanley. Neither spoke, letting him continue. Thomas bowed his head, hands trembling slightly. I thought she just passed out. I tried to wake her, blood started flowing. I panicked. I tried to save her, but she wasn't breathing. I didn't know what to do. Hanley gently, and what did you do next? He was silent, then spoke slowly, word by word. I wiped the blood, changed the bedsheet. I thought I could make it look like an accident. I put her in the bathtub, let the water run. Then, I wrapped her up. I took her away. Fitzpatrick pressed. Took her where, doctor? Thomas looked up, his clouded eyes glinting with something, exhaustion, resignation. North Branch River. I drove out while it was still dark. I knew that stretch had little traffic. I thought the current would carry her away. Fitzpatrick stared at him. That exact spot is where we found her bones and necklace. You remember? Thomas closed his eyes, nodded, voice fully hoarse. The necklace. I threw it with her. She always wore it. The room was so silent, the recorder's whir could be heard. Fitzpatrick noted. Subject admitted physical altercation leading to fatal injury. Confirmed disposal site matches recovery location. But he didn't stop. Why, doctor? Why didn't you call for help, instead of choosing to cover it up? Thomas opened his eyes, staring into space. I've been a doctor for over 40 years. I knew she was dead, and I was afraid. I couldn't lose everything. The patients, the reputation, my daughter. I thought, without a body, no one would know. Fitzpatrick flipped the page, set down the pen. Anything to add before signing? Thomas sat still, shoulders slumped, eyes aged and lost. Finally, he said softly, I've lived with this for over 30 years. Maybe I deserve to pay. He handed the transcript forward. Thomas took the pen, hand shaking as he signed. The signature was crooked, ink smudged, but clear. Thomas E. Myers. Fitzpatrick turned off the recorder. No one said another word. Thomas was led away in silence, steps slow, head bowed. When the door closed, Fitzpatrick sat alone. He opened the notebook, reread the first few lines. Laura Myers missing, presumed accident. He crossed it out, added, confirmed homicide. Confession obtained. Outside, sunset light streamed through the window, casting on the wall. Fitzpatrick stood, glanced at the photo board, where Laura's image still hung center. The smile in the photo was gentle, serene, as if she had heard the confession from the man who ended her life. That confession, concise but weighty, was later recorded verbatim in the court file. It became the decisive evidence, shattering every layer of time's dust and ending 33 years of silence, concluding a disappearance that was finally called by its true name. A murder. In the days following the interrogation, the Cook County Prosecutor's Office buzzed with new energy. After more than 3 decades of waiting, every final piece of the Laura Myers case was now in their hands. The confession, DNA evidence, and a crime scene perfectly matching the forensic model. The task now was to verify, reinforce, and prepare for the most crucial phase: prosecution. The crime scene unit was mobilized at full capacity. Based on sketches, crime scene photos, and prior test videos, the forensic experts coordinated with Fitzpatrick to conduct a full 3D reconstruction of the crime scene. The bedroom at 411 Forest Avenue was recreated in every detail. Beige walls, east-facing window, bed position, and morning light direction on September 19, 1982. Under simulated lighting effects, the blood trajectory appeared clearly, a 45-degree curved arc, starting from the right side of the bed, ending on the wall section where luminol had glowed. When the tech team input strike data based on Thomas Myers' height and position near the victim, the system output nearly exact results. The strike trajectory matched 97% with the real pattern. Fitzpatrick stood silent as the simulation displayed the scene. Laura was likely the only one to witness. A quick, hard, clean blow, just enough to fracture the occipital skull, then blood arcing in a narrow path. Everything matched the forensic conclusion perfectly, reinforcing Thomas's entire confession. I grabbed her arm. She fell. Her head hit the bed frame. Forensic expert Dr. Margaret Chumley, who had identified the impact spatter in the old photos, was invited to view the model. After watching the entire process, she said only, "Nothing left to doubt. Everything here matches the real impact." She agreed to serve as an expert witness at the upcoming trial. Meanwhile, the DNA lab expanded testing. Fitzpatrick requested comparison of the blood sample in Thomas's shirt with the new examination results to confirm the contact mechanism. The technician reported, victim's blood sample embedded deep in the fabric fibers, mixed with suspect's epithelial cells. This is direct contact, not splatter or accidental seepage. The report stated clearly, direct physical transfer from active bleeding source to suspect's sleeve. Reading that line, Fitzpatrick knew they had physical evidence confirming direct interaction between the perpetrator and victim at the time of injury. Combined with the statement, crime scene, and skull examination results, the case was now airtight. On September 25, prosecutor William Hanley convened a meeting with the investigative team, experts, and department consultants. The nearly 300-page file was placed on the table. On the first page was the bold text, State of Illinois versus Dr. Thomas Myers charge, second-degree murder. Laura Myers, 1982. Hanley explained the second-degree charge because Thomas stated the initial act was not premeditated murder but caused death during violence. However, the full cover-up, cleanup, and body disposal afterward proved guilty knowledge and intent to stage the scene, potentially leading to a sentence of up to 20 years imprisonment. Fitzpatrick presented the event sequence using 3D images and forensic reports. The strike scene, blood trail, and victim's movement appeared on the large screen, silencing the room. Everything happened in under 10 seconds, he said. And then, 33 years later, we finally heard the confession. The prosecutor nodded, turning to the tech team. We'll need a real crime scene model in the courtroom, a reconstructed wall section with projected blood spatter, and a model of the metal desk lamp. Chumley would be the lead witness on blood science, the DNA technician as supporting. Additionally, investigator Mills, now retired, who was the first witness to see the 1982 scene. Preparations proceeded swiftly. The prosecutor's office required absolute file security, no details leaked to the media until the first hearing. While the legal team drafted the formal indictment, Fitzpatrick spent hours reviewing every video segment, every photo. Each detail, each piece of evidence was marked, rearranged into a seamless timeline, from the morning of September 19, 1982, to the moment the bones were found in the river in 2015. The night before signing the summary report, he sat alone in the office. Outside the window, Chicago lit up, lights reflecting on the sparkling Lake Michigan. Fitzpatrick opened the photo of Laura, the one of her in the classroom, smiling kindly, eyes bright. He placed the photo next to the thick indictment, rereading the final line Hanley had written. All evidences indicate deliberate physical altercation leading to fatal injury. Case ready for prosecution. He took the pen, signed below, then said softly, as if to the woman in the photo, case ready for trial. The words echoed in the quiet room, closing the 33-year journey to find the truth. In a few weeks, Laura Myers' name would no longer be in the missing persons section, but in the court file, where justice was finally about to be named. November 2015, Cook County Court became the focal point of the entire state of Illinois. After more than 33 years, teacher Laura Myers' disappearance was finally brought to trial. Defendant, Dr. Thomas Myers, 77 years old, the victim's husband. On the morning of November 3rd, Thomas was led into the courtroom in an old gray suit, face gaunt, eyes cold. At the prosecution table, Fitzpatrick and prosecutor William Hanley sat side by side. Behind them, the defendant's daughter, Katie Myers, sat silently with head bowed, hands clutching her mother's silk handkerchief tightly. When Judge Ellen Porter banged the gavel to open, the courtroom immediately fell silent. Prosecutor Hanley began in a calm but firm voice. This is a case that spanned 33 years. A woman was killed, the scene staged, evidence concealed, but science and perseverance have brought the truth back. He briefly outlined the investigation, the 1982 disappearance, overlooked bloodstains, frozen file, until the Cold Case DNA Legacy Project, launched in 2015. On the projection screen, images of each piece of evidence appeared in sequence: the towel, bloodied shirt, skull fragment, and necklace engraved with LM. When Thomas's travel map appeared, matching the bone discovery site under the North Branch River, Hanley pointed to the screen. 33 years ago, he said Laura went jogging and didn't come back. 33 years later, we found her blood in his shirt, in his floor, and in the river he drove over every day. He concluded, "Today, we are not just prosecuting a crime, but the silence that lasted too long." Defense attorney Robert Linton stepped forward. He was composed, avoiding drama. "Your Honor, my client is a doctor, a devoted husband. He has admitted fault for an accident, but this is not premeditated murder." Linton emphasized, no actual murder weapon, no witnesses, and the confession stemmed from mental pressure on an elderly man interrogated for 10 hours. A fall can cause fatal injury. He panicked, acted wrongly, but it was not a plot to kill his wife. He urged the jury not to let emotion replace reason. When the prosecution presented evidence, the courtroom tension was palpable. Fitzpatrick projected the 1982 crime scene images and 2015 luminol photos. The 45-degree blood spatter on the wall, matching the position, confirmed by Laura's DNA. Next was Thomas's shirt, where the victim's blood was found on the inside of the cuff, evidence of direct contact. Then the skull examination results: impact from a hard object weighing 1.5 kilograms, consistent with the direction and force from a right-handed person, the same as Thomas's dominant hand. When the 3D simulation video of the strike played, the room lights dimmed. On the screen, the Laura model collapsed after the impact, blood arcing in a trajectory identical to the real blood stain. A soft murmur rose in the courtroom. Hanley said, "Science doesn't lie. Only people lie." Dr. Margaret Chumley took the stand. Her voice calm, each word firm. "This blood spatter pattern can only occur with strong force impacting a bleeding body. It cannot come from a nosebleed, nor an accident." Prosecution asked, "Can you confirm this was a strike?" She replied, "Yes, and it was delivered by a right-handed person, standing at the right angle of the bed, the defendant's exact position." When the comparison images between the real photo and simulation appeared, the court nearly held its breath. The two patterns matched perfectly. Defense attorney Linton objected, "No murder weapon, just assumptions about a desk lamp." Chumley responded immediately, "We don't need the object because the blood trace speaks for it. The wound shape and blood trajectory match precisely a metal object with a rounded edge, weighed about 1.5 kilograms, and that object disappeared right after the night she died." A hush fell. Next, Fitzpatrick took the stand. He recounted reopening the file from storage, DNA results, to the moment finding the bone fragment and LM engraved necklace. Under the lights, his voice slow and even, but each sentence like a knife cutting through time's silence. "I believe that if we hadn't found the truth, Laura would have stayed silent under the river. Today she speaks again through science." It was Thomas's turn. He stood, voice hoarse, eyes weary. "I didn't want to kill her. We argued, she fell. I panicked. I was wrong and I was afraid. For 30 years, I couldn't live with it." He paused, breathed deeply, then said softly, almost whispering, "If I could go back, I'd call for help. But now it's too late." Katie burst into tears. The judge called for order, but no one could hold back. The jury retired at 3 p.m. 4 hours later, they returned. Tension blanketed the room. The jury foreperson stood, voice clear, on the charge of second-degree murder, in the case of State of Illinois v. Dr. Thomas Myers, we find guilty. The courtroom fell silent, then sighs, camera flashes. Thomas bowed his head, hands clenched. Judge Porter read the verdict. Defendant Thomas Myers is found guilty of second-degree murder, sentenced 20 years imprisonment at the Illinois State Correctional Facility. Court adjourned. 3 sharp gavel bangs echoed. Fitzpatrick closed his eyes briefly. After 33 years, every trace from the faint blood on the wall to the bone in the riverbed had finally been pieced into justice. As he left the courtroom, he caught Katie's eye. She approached, voice trembling. "Thank you. Now my mother can rest in peace." Fitzpatrick just nodded. Outside the courthouse, late fall Chicago sun blazed. Light reflected on the glass, shimmering like the North Branch River surface, where Laura was found. The river still flowed, but this time, carrying no more secrets. The truth had been named. The 20-year prison sentence for Dr. Thomas Myers closed a case spanning over 3 decades. But its aftershocks rippled through Evanston, the quiet town that once believed horrors like this happened elsewhere. The next day, the Chicago Tribune front page blared, "Respected Dr. Shadow Killer, Illinois' longest DNA case." Below was a photo of Thomas being led away, eyes vacant, contrasting an old image of him in a white coat, smiling beside a patient. Many readers couldn't believe their eyes. He had been a symbol of trust, of kindness, a man generations of patients saw as a savior. And now, he was convicted of killing his wife, the woman the community still remembered as the teacher who always smiled at her student. Local forums overflowed with comments. "I was born in Evanston. My mom was his patient. Can't believe it. I was in Mrs. Laura's class. She used to say, 'If something's unfair, speak up.' She had to stay silent too long." Old memories resurfaced. Neighbors recalled the September 1982 morning when police cars arrived at the Myers home. They remembered blue and red lights flashing through the fog, the steaming coffee cup on the kitchen table, visible through the window. And they remembered Thomas, eerily calm then, saying, "My wife just went jogging." 33 years later, that statement became the town's biggest lie. National outlets immediately added the case to America's cold cases solved by DNA highlights. The press called it the longest-running DNA homicide case in Illinois, the state's longest DNA-solved murder. On TV, CBS Evening News replayed trial footage, the verdict, and the strike simulation reconstructed by Fitzpatrick's forensic team. The anchor's voice intoned, "A blood stain overlooked in 1982, became the key evidence bringing the killer to justice. Just one drop of blood. But it spoke for 33 years of silence." Elderly viewers in Evanston watched with tears. They mourned not just Laura, but the betrayed trust. A week after the verdict, Lakeside Elementary School, where Laura taught, held a small memorial in the yard. Late fall skies were pale gray, maple leaves drifting around her photo placed on a white draped table. Retired colleagues read from Laura's notebook lessons on perseverance, on always believing the truth will be found, no matter how late. The current principal spoke, "For 33 years, we've spoken her name in the past tense. From today, we speak her name in justice." Students hung blue ribbons around the yard trees, her favorite color. A new small plaque was mounted outside classroom 2B. Laura Myers' classroom, who taught the world about truth. Katie Myers attended silently. She placed a bouquet of white daisies on the table, gazing at her mother's photo for a long time. When asked her thoughts, she only said, "I grew up in the shadow of 2 people, Mom gone, Dad silent." Today, the light finally came back. The Laura Myers case became a clear testament to the power of DNA technology and human investigator perseverance. After the verdict, the Chicago Police Department officially expanded the Cold Case DNA Legacy Project statewide, reviewing over 1,200 files. Fitzpatrick, the lead solver, was invited as program consultant. At the press conference, he said briefly, "If there's one thing I learned from this case, it's that time doesn't erase the truth. It just makes us work harder to find it again." Other agencies quickly followed. A slew of backlog cases from the 70s and 80s were reopened. Each week, the press reported another solved by DNA technology, all stemming from Laura's story. In Evanston, residents still spoke of the case, but not with anger, rather regret. Outside St. Luke's church, someone left a handwritten note. Forgiveness is also justice. Many former patients of Thomas sent letters to the court saying they couldn't hate him completely, but couldn't forget what he did. To them, Thomas didn't just kill a woman, he killed a community's good memories. In prison, Thomas was said to have stayed silent. No appeal. According to guards, he read the Bible each morning and never spoke of the case. He lives in silence, as if still hearing the rivers flow, one recounted. End of 2015, as snow began falling on Lake Michigan's shore. Fitzpatrick drove back to Gilson Park, where Laura had jogged that morning. Wind blew through, carrying cold salt scent and white mist. He parked, stepped out, gazed at the foggy lake surface. Waves lapped steadily at the shore, cold but peaceful. As if everything had finally closed, he remembered it all. The towel in old storage, the luminol light, the LM engraved necklace, and Chumley's words, "Blood never stays silent." As thick fog blanketed the water, Fitzpatrick heard in his mind the TV anchor's voice from the verdict night coverage, a simple but haunting close. 33 years of silence, one drop of blood spoke for it all. That line, like a final farewell to Laura Myers, the woman whose death awakened a generation, that truth can be buried, but will always find its way back, even if it takes 33 years and just one drop of blood to do it. The Laura Myers story reminds us, in today's American life, that justice often requires both science and community, and the calm vigilance of each individual. In 1982, Evanston, everything looked normal. The teacher jogging mornings at Gilson Park, her polite doctor husband, the quiet house. But small details said otherwise. The 45-degree impact spatter, blood on the bedroom wall, Laura's blood inside Thomas's shirt cuff, the dry cleaning receipt, noting bedsheet stained, pickup September 20th, 82, and the bone fragment with the LM necklace hook surfacing in the North Branch River. Practical lessons for the present. 1. When a loved one goes missing, don't clean up or rearrange the house. Call 911 early and preserve the scene. A towel or bedsheet could save a case after 30 years. 2. Don't let professional halo cloud judgment. A respected doctor can still be harmful. American culture values trust in institutions, but that trust is strongest with transparency and verification. 3. Support funding for cold case DNA legacy and cold case units. DNA science, luminol, 3D simulation turned to accident voluntary departure, file into homicide, and gave voice to the victim. 4. Learn to recognize and intervene early in domestic violence. Prolonged silence stole 3 decades from Katie. Finally, for every community, from Evanston to any American town, remember, sometimes one drop of blood and perseverance is enough to bring the truth back to light. If you believe that truth deserves to be found, no matter how long it's buried, subscribe to the channel to join us in continuing the journey to bring light to forgotten cases. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video, where another story, another drop of blood, might speak again.